Welcome to the QuickCast. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Belief episode of the QuickCast. If you're new here, we take the themes of strength from Gallup, which are called the Clifton Strengths themes, and we talk about how they work for writers, how they work in general, and then how they work for writers. So we're going to start off with Terry and Becca discussing what belief looks like. And then we have three amazing authors that we're going to talk to about how their belief works in their writing. And so take it away, Terry and Becca. When we talk about belief, typically where we lead with in this discussion is about the passionate, uncompromising values of belief, right? So there's a sense in which any strength can produce some kind of passion, right? Like it's not like only belief people can be passionate, but belief people will be extremely passionate about what they believe in. So like when you watch the author talk show, you actually see them like almost get possessed by their belief when they start talking about what they believe in. It's a very visceral, physical thing to me. And for me, I see it as an anchor that is so deep inside them that it just brings out this feeling of like, I want to share this. I want the world to be right in this way. And it's a very deep feeling, anchored strength.
Yeah, it's one of those things where they will not. You see it in them when you challenge it. Their shrug, their body language is like, well, that's how it is. Nothing can change my mind. It's unyielding. It's uncompromising for sure. It's like I was talking to somebody the other day about their belief, and I said, here's what it is. If I was to say to you, you from now on must start breathing water. No longer is oxygen going to work for you. Well, all of us would go, that ain't going to happen, no matter what. Like that's just, and so to me, when you find people who have this belief, it's like there's nothing I can do about that. This is the way it is, and it's very contagious and intriguing to those of us
that it is so contagious.
Then because those of us don't have it, I'm like, well, I could be convinced. I could change my mind on lots of things. I could argue one way or the other. There's times when this may not apply, and to a belief, they're like, no, there are no times when this does not apply. You're right. Speaking a different language to me. It's just, you're right. It is an energy. It's a presence. Like we talk about other strengths have this feeling of, and I coached somebody the other day. I'm going to say it here again. I cannot get over her. She had this responsibility belief combination that just made me feel like no matter what ever happened, I could go to her and I could do things that were against her belief. She wouldn't be happy about it, but she wouldn't make me feel bad about it. She would help me get through it, and I could go to her. Like when you talk about wanting to sit at the feet of someone, like, I mean, that's it. I really had this whole emotional feeling, and it was just the presence, which words are not enough to contain it. And then I realized that this is what I run into when I experience with other belief people. Like my daughter has this exact feeling that I get from her when it comes to certain things. And it's also the willingness to make sacrifices, right? You will sacrifice everything to maintain this belief, because that's just what has to happen. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Like belief is in my mostly bucket and it's not in my always. And thank God it's not, because can you even imagine?
Yes, I can. Wow. I can definitely imagine.
Because when you see it in me, like when my because I have a connectedness significance that will bring this up very quickly, and when you see it happen, because I see this in my mom is a high belief, one of my best friends is a high belief, and you almost see it click in where it's like whatever it takes, we're going to the mattresses about this thing, right? And so things like other people feeling like they can have success or things like that, like when you see it happen, when it gets challenged and it comes up, I do feel a little bit possessed by it, right? And that's how belief should almost feel when you watch people who have strong belief. There's a reason that it's not as common though, because if everyone was like that, it would be exhausting for the world. Like it would be exhausting. And you really do need these people that you can almost rally around who have this core unshakable belief. And if you ever are around belief people when they're having a conversation about something that that is a core value of theirs, that just is like deep inside of them, and you see it get crossed, you can physically see them become different, right? It's like what Terry was talking about breathing water instead of oxygen. You almost see them not able to really like function for a second, right? If you're watching them closely. Stuff, it's not like they glitch and can't ever function again, but if you're watching them closely, you can see that moment where it gets crossed, because it's so deeply intrinsic to who they are that they just can't shut it off.
And that belief underlies everything a person with healthy belief does.
Yeah.
That they won't even, and often it's common for belief people to say, I don't really know what that is, because it's so much a part of who they are. And I think of my daughter for sure. She has this belief system that all artists should work together. They should all support each other. Every artist should be paid for their work and valued. And you can see it in everything that she does. And it's not she doesn't stand up and say it. She shows it. She
She
does it.
acts.
And here's a great example. She started a small little production company, and then they started doing online training for people to introduce them to stuff. And like one of the tiny things that came through was she knew two people in the community that did not like each other from an artistic point of kind of jealousy or rivalry. And yet with her creating this thing, she brought them both into
Yep.
her path and into her group, and they got to really know each other, and now they're very big supporters of each other and fans of each other. And that's an example to me of how belief just pulls these people. These two people would have never worked together. They did not like each other, yet they came to Sydney, they came to work with her knowing that the other was there, and now they're great friends. And to me, that's just a great example of how those belief people just swirl it around them, and create. They do create what they envision.
So then the flip side of that, and we did talk a little bit about this as well, is that when belief people's when you cross the line with a belief person, it's very clear that you cross the line, and sometimes you are no longer a part of that experience anymore when you cross that line. And I feel like the you can lose beliefs, can lose friendships over this. They can lose working relationships. They can lose, and not that it bothers the belief person, because if you talk to someone with high belief and someone crossed the line with them, you're done, you're gone. Like that's no longer a question. And it's not like I'm judging you, you're bad and you're gone. It's more like we clearly don't align with each other. So, and I think Kennedy put it this way. She said, um, then you didn't belong here in the first place. You
Correct.
only thought you did. And so
Exactly.
like this is a place for people, who are aligned with this belief. And so then that's the easy way with belief to for them to let people go. But it definitely does create, and again, I'm talking about balcony belief, because basement belief is a whole different thing that we will not address in this video, because it can be very damaging and very dangerous, and almost to a point where like basement belief does more bad than balcony belief does good,
Yep.
just in terms of because of the way the world works. But when you have that balcony belief, and I always think of if you've ever watched the Gallup 2-minute video or 1-minute video about belief, and the person that they have doing that video, Jackie, she's a very famous coach around the Gallup circles. She's predates me, has been at Gallup since long before I heard about strengths. She is so high in belief and so balcony in belief that you can feel it come off her. Like you can just feel, because it's this altruism, and connectedness has this as well. And so connectedness belief is a mega power pair. I think that connectedness can bring belief up from 10, 15 strengths away, because they're just so focused on that altruistic good of the world. Everyone is in this together kind of feeling. And that altruism of high belief is palpable. They want the world to be a better place. And the way we are better is if we hold each other accountable for our actions, and if we are consistent with what we believe. Like, and that is so beautiful when it's in the balcony and when it's working well. It's so powerful.
And self-assurance can people with self-assurance can understand some of the belief principles. They talk about that as well, that they share
Right.
similar kinds of feelings. Belief is more without, self-assurance is more within, but some of those
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
thoughts and feelings and
Well,
ways
and
about
so
it.
self-assurance would be slightly different in that the conviction itself can change, right? Like the
Yeah.
conviction of a self-assurance can change. A belief conviction, like the belief people that you will know, they've had the same conviction their whole life. Like they will be this passionate. The passion itself might grow, but they've always had that value in themselves. Welcome everyone to the Strengths for Authors talk show with High Belief. I'm here with my three belief writers that I have been hoping to get on here because they're so incredible. So I'm going to let each of you introduce yourselves, and let's start up in the corner with Tonya. Hi, Tonya.
Hi, Becca. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm Tonya Kappes, and I write cozy mystery and straight cozy mystery and paranormal cozy mystery. And I am the belief is number 5 in my profile, but I'm just surprised it's not number 1. I can
Right.
start off by saying that. So,
Right.
yeah.
And hi, Kennedy.
Hi. Hi, I'm Kennedy Ryan. I write contemporary romance, and belief is number 4 in my mix. And it's so funny because I had taken the Strengths Finders, I had taken the test before, like years before, and it was number 2. And I remember when we had our one-on-one, Becca, we talked about it kind of sliding, and it had slid down to so it's like number 4 now, and it used to be number 2, so it kind of shuffles around a little bit.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I can see that. It's funny too. I bet a lot of high top 5 belief people would say, I feel like it might be number 1 because it
Yeah.
feels like such a guiding strength sometimes. Yeah. And hi, Jeannie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeannie Moon, and I write contemporary romance and romantic women's fiction. A lot of it now more seasoned romance, which is fun. So, because I'm seasoned. So there you go. And I'm a number 4 belief. And I'm another, I think it could probably be higher, but my futuristic is high. So that's probably why.
Right.
But yeah, number 4 for me.
Yeah, we were talking before we started recording about how unique belief is among writers, and it's so unique that you are likely to be the only belief person that anyone you know knows. Like
Wow.
that's how uncommon it is, and it's almost as uncommon in the general population, where it's the most common thing to have like one belief person in a larger friend circle. And so it's definitely not something that a lot of people run into on a regular basis. And so I'm really excited to talk about belief today because I feel like it's going to be something that a lot of us, when we hear it, if we don't have it, are going to be like, oh, is that what that is? Oh, I always wondered, right?
That's what's
Because
wrong with her.
that might be what they say. Yeah, let's yeah. Well, because so if you are unfamiliar with belief, belief people are very passionate and principled. Like that's the kind of key keywords about belief. And so I'm super interested to hear from each of you how you would describe it. And let's start with Kennedy. When you tell people what belief is, how do you describe it?
I think I talk about it in terms of conviction and passion, because usually when I'm talking about belief, it's in what I found myself doing a lot, especially since I went through the course, is now when people ask me in interviews about my writing process and about why I write what I write, because a lot of times people ask me, why do you write stories about these things? Like, why do you write about this stuff that you don't see very much in romance? And I what I tell them is that I write out of conviction. That I'm not paying attention to trends. I'm not looking at what anybody else is doing. That for me, it's a very internal process, how I reach what I write, that I figure out. Also, I talk about it in terms of calling, which is something you don't hear writers talk very much about. I talk about storytelling as sacred. To me, storytelling is sacred. And I don't see writing as just a vocation, but I see it as a calling. And I write for impact. So whenever I write a story, I want to understand how it's going to affect the world, not the literal world, but I'm always thinking, how is this going to land with someone else? How is it going to affect something? How am I shining light? So for me, belief really grows out of my convictions. And when I'm talking about it in terms of writing, it's interesting. I don't want to talk about everything because I could talk about everything. But now that I look at my whole life, I understand. Like my son was diagnosed when he was 2. By the time he was 4, I had started a foundation for families who have children with autism. And for 11 years, I started writing. And then I was like, oh, we need to talk about autism. So I started a charitable initiative to raise money for autism. And it goes with, I'm also an activator, an achiever, a maximizer. So all of those things work together, but it's in every part of my life. So anywhere I am, belief is going to be, and this is what it's going to become. I'm always going to speak up. I'm always going to be passionate. And when people talk about writing passion projects, I'm really good friends with Sierra Simone. And so she and I are natured a lot alike, and we write, even though she's different, we are a lot alike. And I said, people talk about writing their passion projects. For me, when I hear people talk about passion projects, I'm like, that's literally every book. Like that's how every book feels for me, like a passion project.
Right. Well, it sounds like, and this is very common, that belief presents the call to action, right? That's where the call to action comes from. And then your activator and other strengths are acting on that, but that everything you do kind of gets passed through. And we talk about it like you're wearing glasses through which you see the world. And those glasses are your convictions or your values. And everything that you see gets filtered through how that works. So if your belief pairs up with your activator, it's the belief that's presenting the call to action and the activators acting on it.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Jeannie, how do you describe belief to people?
I always tell people, well, if I'm getting judgmental, that's why. So if I'm in my basement and yes, I'm judging you. So I am. But I think for me, because I mentioned this before we started recording, I'm a lifelong educator. I've been a teacher for 35 years. So I think a lot of what I write and how I see belief is it's similar to what Kennedy said, is that I always look at how something is going to hit with somebody else. Whether that's my kids, my students, my family, my readers. I always want to know, what is somebody going to take away from what I do with them, for them, write anything. It's about impact. It's about what I can do and say to make something better or more effective. Because I think that if I'm not doing that, I'm not doing my job, whether it's as a teacher, as a mom, as a writer. If I'm not making an impact on somebody, if I'm not making them think, then I'm not doing my job. So for me, it's all about hitting those notes so that somebody walks away with something more than what they had. So they walk away with more than they had before. And that's really it. It's just, it's something that's so internal and it drives you. Like I said, I'm high futuristic, I'm high individualization, I'm high strategic, which actually kind of makes the belief go a little bit crazy sometimes, I think. But my individualization and my focus on each person, I think that also plays off of my belief too, that need to see every single person individually and not generalize. I think it's important. So.
Oh yeah. Well, and I wouldn't
with character. So.
Yeah, like I wouldn't be surprised as well if each of you have a way in which your other strengths are all colored by the belief that you have. Like if you're high in those blue, like that blue individualization, then you're going to have beliefs that come out of that strength. that you hold to be true, right? Like each person is an individual and we treat everybody in the best way that we can to get what they need. But I also want to point something out too, because I think Kennedy said this also similarly, where it's not uncommon for belief people to care about what you're going to take away from the book, because what you take away is what stays with you. And I think a lot of storytellers understand that when I tell you a story, it has a lasting influence on you. And so I'm cautious then, if I'm a belief person, about how my landing hits with people, because I know that might stay with them for the rest of their lives. And I want to make sure that I'm doing something that I believe in, or that I care about, or I value, right? That's really fascinating. Tonya, how do you describe your belief?
So I am, my belief also goes back to my purpose. And I believe that it is my purpose to be a writer, or an author, a storyteller, really. That's not my degree by trade, but it came into my life when I needed it. And I believe that it was a God-given purpose for me to write Southern cozy mysteries. And my tagline is Southern hospitality with a smidgen of homicide. So I promise, since my belief system is being kind to others, the golden rule of do unto others, just be nice. And I want readers to, my belief is, I always say it's my purpose for just one reader to escape their day. It might be a great day, it might be a bad day, but when I'm writing, like Kennedy said, I'm focusing on one reader. I'm not focusing on the collective of readers that I have. I'm focusing on the one reader to deliver what I believe will help them escape. And so when people say, when they talk about money of a writing career, I honestly say that I don't even look at the income. I look at the one reader still. And that is my core belief system, is that one driven purpose. And so much so that, like Kennedy was saying, she started a foundation. So 8 years ago, I had a couple of readers out west say, hey, when are you going to come out west to do a book signing? I want to meet you. So I started my own reader event. And it was a reader event where I didn't sell books. I didn't bring books. I didn't go to a book signing. It was specifically for me to rent a mystery and to have readers come there and host them, just so, we could meet and we could talk. And so it was not the purpose of making money, but it was just my belief that if they picked up my book to escape in what I promised, because I believe that that's my purpose, that's my God-given purpose. So when people ask me, what that means in belief, when I talk about my writing, is I have that mission statement, and that's it. I believe that I was put on this earth to do this and to help people escape. And again, if it's just one reader, then I've done my job for that book, or my purpose, and that's what keeps me going. And I full-heartedly believe that. So it goes back to my belief system, that I believe that with my Southern roots, I have a welcoming heart, and readers, I want readers to feel that from me when they meet me. That is where I believe that belief system comes in. And I'm also an achiever, and I'm high focused and strategic. So I think all of those go into my writing career, and the belief.
Yeah. I mean, I think like what all of you have hit on, and I'm so glad that you said things the way you said them, because it's the depth to which you feel convicted that something is true, right? Right. That depth itself is the belief commonality. And it's so interesting. We just did a sort of collective group of belief writers. We had a group where we were all talking about what our belief looks like. And I had said at the beginning, I'm going to ask everyone not to talk about your convictions, specifically the content of your convictions, during the class, because I want us to focus on not the quality of the convictions, like not the glasses, but the fact that we're all wearing them, right? Because it was almost like, and I don't know if you, what Jeannie had said about I'm judgmental. And Jeannie and I talk about this a lot in her coaching, where I would say it's not a bad thing to be judgmental. I think there's an expectation in the larger culture that we shouldn't ever judge anyone for anything ever. But if you don't judge whether someone is living by their convictions or not, then we're not holding each other to that anchor of like what I believe, and do my actions match what I believe, and that type of thing. And then belief people are incredibly influential and impactful, and they can change the world. So like, if belief people would stop acting on their convictions, they would lose that sense of the judgmental nature, not in terms of, are you a good or bad person, but does that line up with what we know to be true, either about you or about the world or whatever, right? So like that judgmentalism, I feel like what I want is for the world to accept that judgmental nature a little bit more, so that we don't have this sense of like, oh, you shouldn't be so passionate. Oh, you shouldn't be so convicted. Oh, you shouldn't, but instead to take advantage of the belief people, to allow ourselves to push up against a belief person and to come out the other side and be more convicted ourselves, or to be more centered or more anchored. Because I feel like this is what we get from all of you who are high belief. We get that sense of, I know exactly where they stand. I know exactly where their boundaries and barriers are, and they're willing to take a stand for what they believe in. And I feel like that is a beneficial thing in the world. We need people who will do that. But we were sort of joking earlier about it'll help you to understand the person, but then you might be like, oh, that's what's wrong with her. And I feel like that might be some of what other people, the barrier label, right, of what other people would say about belief. But that it really is, I feel like I want to be a belief evangelist. Like, we really need belief people in the world. But then that means if we don't have belief, we have to be tolerant of people who do. Like, we have to be willing to let people be very convicted and be very anchored in their beliefs, and to act on those belief systems. And that's, it's a beautiful thing. So I'm super interested to hear, and I'm going to start with Jeannie, because I have a specific question about the seasoned romance specifically, because I feel like that's something that like you have kind of become known as an advocate for seasoned romance. But I'm really interested to hear from all of you. Do you feel like your belief shapes the actions that you take in terms of like the characters you choose to write, or the situations you choose to write? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Oh, absolutely. The Christmas book that came out last October, Christmas in Angel Harbor, was an absolute hardcore, like hardcore. What I mean is like there was no doubt that I was writing seasoned characters. They were both 50. And and still that's younger than me. So like, people are like, I'm like, they were young, they're only 50. But it was important to me to show that the relationship, the love, how it developed wasn't different. And that's what everybody said. It was just so normal. And I said, what does that mean exactly? I just want people to see that just because there are years behind you doesn't mean that your heart isn't beating, that your mind isn't growing, that your emotions aren't bubbling up inside. And I think sometimes as we get older and show a little bit more wear and tear, and we have those miles behind us, people seem to think that we're dead inside, and we're not. So that's really important for me. And that was one of the nicest and the most surprising comments I got from people. It was their relationship was just so normal. It was just like another romance. And I went, exactly. It's a romance just the same. I said, like I said, just because we have years behind us doesn't mean that's going to change. And book I'm writing now, my heroine is 35, which is technically considered seasoned.
Technically in the genre is
technically
seasoned.
in the genre, it's considered
So
seasoned.
I'm seasoned too.
Right.
Like
Me
I'm also
too.
seasoned.
bring it on.
Yeah.
Welcome to the club. It's all good. We're happy here. And
Right.
I'm dealing with her with regard to long held high functioning anxiety.
Right.
Again, hello, here I am. But she's I always try to hit on something, whether it's anxiety or grief or something, because I want to show people that characters aren't perfect, that they're just like you. And that's really important to me. And I think the seasoned romance gives me a lot of ability to do that because there's a
Yeah.
lot of mileage, there's a lot of experience.
Yeah. Kennedy, what about you? Do you see your belief in how you choose characters and situations your characters are in, storylines?
For sure. I think it's a combination of things. When I look at some of the books that I've written, like I wrote a book called Long Shot that dealt with domestic abuse. That's not something that I've personally ever dealt with. I saw something happen, when there was a football player who knocked his girlfriend unconscious in an elevator.
Oh, right.
It captured it on the surveillance footage, and then he dragged her out of the elevator like a bag of trash, literally. And when I saw that, I felt so much indignation about it. And that wasn't something that I had ever personally experienced, but I about it. And I felt like there was an experience that needed to be articulated and that light needed to be shown on it. And so it took me 2 years to write that book, but I interviewed and all this stuff. So that's an example of like writing out of a conviction about something that needs attention. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think when we're talking about writing out of my personal convictions, I definitely see that too. I wrote a series called All the King's Men, and I'm pretty progressive, and it was a series about, and these characters had a particular perspective. I wrote, the heroine was Yavapai Apache. And so she had a problem with the pipeline being laid on native grounds that were supposed to be protected. And their meet cute was at a pipeline protest, so, when I say meet cute, there's like dogs and, it's a whole, it's a real, she was the leader of the protest. She grew up as a water protector, and they were, chaining themselves to bulldozers. So that is a particular perspective. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So, and she grows up to become kind of like an Olivia Pope character from like Scandal. And she's a kingmaker. So she becomes someone who puts politicians into power who she believes will change the world. But that's a particular perspective. Do you know what I mean? Right. And so, there are people who are like, don't write about politics. And I'm not really writing about politics. Politics is the backdrop for a love story. But at the same time, there are people who say, keep politics out of your writing. We don't want to hear it. But at the same time, I don't really care. Do you know what I mean? Like the thing about belief and about conviction is that there's someone who is going to be on the polar opposite of your belief system, who is just as convicted about their beliefs as you are. Do you know what I'm saying? Yep. And for me, one of my other top strengths is woo, so I'm constantly in my writing, I find myself being persuasive in what I'm writing. And it feels sometimes like, is she building a case? Like, I know we had a really steamy love scene and there was a kiss that lasted about 8 pages, but I also feel like she's trying to convince me of something, So those things make their way into my writing, my convictions, obviously, but I do sometimes feel like she's kind of building a case here, Yeah,
I love it. I love it because I feel like the people who really love that style of book where it's like it makes you think, right, it makes you like you almost have to reckon, I think, a little bit. Yes. I feel like this is the case with a lot of belief books, whether it's intentional or not, right? It's almost like the belief, where they stand, and you have to know, I'm either with that or I'm not. And I
And
don't think that it's bad to,
no,
yeah,
there's
I
an
love it.
aspect of me, and I've reconciled it for my brand. Like I've
Yeah.
reconciled this. There's an
Right.
aspect of me and of what I write that says I'm going to have these characters wrestle with these issues, because you can't watch them wrestle with these issues without walking through that process yourself. Do you
Right.
know what I mean? If
Right.
not only are they asking these questions, these existential questions in some cases, these the morally gray questions, the moral compass questions, the why do we think this way questions, if they're asking them of themselves, then at some point you as the reader will have to ask it of yourself. And I am completely comfortable with that.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
love that too. I love that because I think we need, like I said with the Tolkien quote, right? Like that when the front doors close to logic, the back doors open to story. And I do feel like the belief writer has an opportunity to tell a story that makes us ask questions,
Right.
and that makes us think about our convictions, and that makes us
Right.
consider our ethics and our morals, in addition to also being a great story.
Right.
And being really engaging and interesting. And even if you're not into belief stuff,
Right.
which not everybody is, you're
Right.
still going to love the book, right? And I
Yes.
feel like this is the talent that all three of you have that I really appreciate about belief, is that I don't feel like I'm being convinced of something, but I also kind of feel convinced of something. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's a real talent that not a lot of, well, no other strength can produce it. Like no other strength can produce it in the same way. It's just it's so fascinating. And I also love that all of you at some point have said a version of this thing, which is, I don't really care if it sells or not.
It's so true. I mean,
Because
Yeah,
there are so many
definitely.
belief writers that need to hear that. They need to hear, and a lot of connectedness and strategic as well. They share some overlap, but they need to hear that it's possible to not care what people think and also still to please people. Like that's possible
right.
to do. So I'm really glad you all have brought that up.
Well, and
Tanya, what about, oh
Write
yeah, go
your
ahead, Kennedy.
story.
No, go ahead.
Write your story.
right.
Right.
With
Yes.
that, I just wanted to say, because I don't want
Yeah.
people to think, oh, so Kennedy writes these books and she doesn't even care if they ever even make money. Like for me, I have the strategic, I have the achiever, I have those
Yes.
things. And I feel like when I'm writing a story, there's one hat, you know, and I'm completely writing the story of that. And once the story is done and is uncompromised, then I put on my businesswoman hat and I say, now, how do I find the people who want this? Because I wrote this story not caring that there are people who don't want it. Now, as a businesswoman and as a strategic person,
right?
Yes,
Yep.
It is now my responsibility as a businesswoman to find the people who will buy this book. Yep. You know, I know I wrote it. I know I wrote it, and there are people who won't want it. But now that it's done and it is uncompromised, the content is uncompromised. It's done. Now I have to put on my hat as a businesswoman, as a strategic businesswoman, and say, now go find the people who do want this book, because you have to make a living. It's both. For me, it's both.
Yep. Yeah. That's a great way to put it too, because I feel like the belief wouldn't be happy if the expectation was that I was going to change something about what I'm going to do. Right. But you can always find readers. Tonya, what about you? How do you describe, or no, actually, let me ask the question, the same question.
Okay.
Do you find yourself making decisions about characters and situations that have to do with your convictions?
Yes. So I have one series that, because churches are everywhere around here in the South. Right. And so I grew up in a church, and I grew up in a church believing my preacher and our church split, and we went with his side and then found out all the bad stuff. So that found its way into a mystery, one of my mysteries. And spoiler alert, I'm sure everybody's probably, you know, I mean, it's not a big deal that I say this, but he ended up being a killer in my book, my preacher of my series. And you know, people say, oh, don't write about, my mom had read the archive. She was, oh my gosh, how am I going to go around town? You have to put the preacher in the prison and da da da. And I'm like, Mom, I mean, she was just, beyond.
I love that.
And yeah, and I'm like, Mom, I lived it. And my strong belief is that, what my strong belief is. And I know that a lot of the cozy mystery readers are church going, older women, and are probably going to get really mad and get upset. But I put in that Southern hospitality humor with my secondary characters to, like you said, they don't see that I'm saying something until they're like, oh, did she just, say something, and I made sure that, and I mean, a lot of readers did question, like, wow, I never thought I'd see a preacher in a cozy mystery become a killer and a cheater and a thief, and I had all of those qualities. And it was because of that situation had changed my belief as I grew up. And my own person, which found its way into my writing, as well as 3 years ago, I wrote, I'm in my 50s, so I wrote a cozy sleuth in her 50s, and I had never seen that. And I wasn't sure how that would be perceived because most cozy sleuths are like in their 20s, but my readers are 45 and up. And so I thought, you know what? I'm an empty nest mom of 4 boys. It wasn't all rosies, it wasn't, that way. And so her subplot, we're 8 books in now, but her subplot is, menopause. It is, I'm having to deal with grown children. It's having to deal with, she's a widow. She had to go through a death and dating again at the age of 50, which, I'm not dating at 50, but I went through a divorce and know all those things, being a single mom, having adult children, her adult children, having a child, her becoming a grandmother. Menopause has been a really fun one to write. And then I actually, because I, kind of like what Jeannie was saying about her seasoned, characters, is that it's not just these bebopping, 20, 30-year-old cozy sleuths that just happen up on clues. I mean, my girl is older. She is strategically planning with what she has learned along her 50 years, how to come up with the clues or how to figure it out, and those kind of things. So she's very smart. And it's not that you don't see cozy mystery normal sleuths being smart. It's just I strategically made her this way because of my core beliefs is that not every amateur sleuth is stupid and stumbles upon a body.
Yes.
And so again, it's also, all my stuff is Southern, so and it's humorous, and so I make sure that is woven into the hot flashes and all the heartaches and the death, and she has some health issues, and so I wanted to make sure that I even had her in a coma, and she overheard a death, but as she's trying to get that brain fog out, she's trying, so I'm trying to make it everyday real life situations that I've either gone through myself or I have gone through with adult parents, and even have touched on like dementia, like Kennedy was saying that, it's something, it's in the older, as I've been a caregiver of an aunt, I think that, like she was saying, her son has autism. She's bringing up awareness to it. And so, like we were saying earlier, I'm bringing awareness to things. It's just that you don't realize it until you've read the book. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. I've even had readers like research stuff, says, wow, I had to research that after you talked about it in your book. And that wasn't even the main plot of the book. But that's part of how my belief weaves into my books. Yeah. But the main thing my mother about died over was the preacher.
Yeah, I bet.
And I might not be done with that yet.
I know. I love that too, because I also write in cozy and also have a preacher who's not a great guy.
I love your cozy.
And have gotten some flack for that character. And so I feel like what's so funny is as you were talking, I was thinking like my belief is relatively high. It's not as high as all y'all's, but it's high enough that I get more inspired the more I talk to the three of you. I'm just like, oh, like literally as Tonya was talking, I'm like, maybe I should just go for it and let myself
it.
do that thing that I'm like, I don't want to do this because I feel like it's gonna, my woo is so high. I'm like, are people gonna hate me? And so I have to admit that just listening to the three of you talk inspires me, because I feel like there's this sense of how belief makes decisions in a way that is so internal and intrinsic. Like I've been at conferences and listened to Jeannie talk about seasoned romance, and I go away wanting to write seasoned romance, or like listening to Kennedy talk about convictions, and I go away and I'm like, I want to be more convicted, right? And Tonya and the pastor, I'm just like, I should listen to my belief instinct more. And I think, and you may not all realize that you do this, but the more that you share who you really are and what you believe and where that deep belief comes from and how you're willing to act on your convictions, the more you raise the bar in the industry and you raise the bar with your fellow writers and with your family. And it can cause friction sometimes. Sure, there's going to be friction every time we grow. It's painful, right? But like the causing of friction is something that you all as belief people are uniquely able to handle.
Right.
Like your belief makes you willing to take those stands and be principled, and we need it. Like we need it in the industry. As you can see, these authors and their passionate, uncompromising selves are very much the epitome of what it means to have high belief as a writer. And so you see kind of all the different facets of what it looks like to have high belief. There are people who very consciously utilize it, and then people who use it unconsciously, and it just comes out of them. And I think that's so great to see. I'm really excited that we are almost done with our series of Clifton Strengths themes. If you've been around here for a while, you know that it's taken us quite a while to get through these. And once we're finished doing each one of the individual strengths, we are going to start a new strength series. But for right now, I want to say tune in next week because we're going to have another strength coming. And I hope to see you soon. Have a great week, and I'll see you on the next Quick Cast. Bye.